Metro 2035, Dmitry Glukhovsky, Chapter 4. Payment. Alexeyevskaya was like Exhibition, only a crummier version. They tried to cultivate mushrooms and made bungled efforts with pigs here too, but as luck would have it, the mushrooms and the pigs always turned out half dead. So there was hardly enough for the locals and nothing was left for trading. But the locals were a good match for their own pigs, sickly and resigned to the fact that in their fairy tale, the beginning and the end were both boring, and everyone knew them in advance. The walls here used to be white and marble, but now it was impossible to say what they used to be like. Everything that could be pried off and sold had been. All that remained was a concrete shell and a few human lives. Scraping away concrete was difficult, and no one in the metro needed goods of that sort, so most of the trading that took place concerned who the Alexeyevans were going to die for in battle. If there was any choice, the price would have been higher, but apart from Exhibition, there were no buyers to be found. So now the main purpose of Alexeyevskaya Station's existence was to protect Exhibition Station. And therefore, at Exhibition, the tunnel leading to Alexeyevskaya was regarded as calm. It could take a week to make your way through some stretches of tunnel, but even with all the compulsory precautions, it took them perhaps 30 minutes to get through this one. Although the minutes were left behind on the clock at Exhibition. It was 10 years now since the clock at Alexeyevskaya had been stolen. And since then, everyone there lived according to his own intuition. If someone wanted night, then for him it was night. After all, in the metro, night never ended. It was the day that had to be imagined. The guard detail glanced listlessly at the walkers, their pupils as tiny as the eyes of needles. There was a somber little white cloud hanging over the sentry post, and the air smelled of foot wrappings. They had been smoking dope. The officer of the watch heaved a sigh and made an effort. "Where to?" "Peace Prospect, to the market," said Artyom, with making any effort to slip in through eye of that needle. "They won't let you through there." Artyom gave him a warm smile. "That's no concern of yours, uncle." "The tangent times the tangent gives the cotangent," the old man replied, infected by Artyom's genial mood and wishing to something agreeable too. And with that they parted. "Which way shall we go?" Homer asked Artyom. "From the Prospect. If they let us into Hanza, round the circle. Anything's better than going straight down along our line. Unpleasant memories, you know. Hanza will be safer. I have a visa stamped in my passport. Miller fixed that up for me. Will they let you in? There's a quarantine, isn't there?" "They always have some kind of quarantine. We'll break through somehow. All the problems will start after that. Teatralnaya, no matter which side you come at it from. You chose a fine place for your radio operator to live, Granddad, in the middle of a minefield." "What do you... I'm joking!" The old man squinted in a special kind of way, looking in under his forehead, inside himself, where he evidently had a map of the metro laid out. Artyom always had his own map in front of his eyes. He'd learned to look straight through it. He'd learned that in a year of serving with Miller. "I'd say, it's best to go to Pavlitz. It's longer but quicker. And from there up along the Green Line. If we're lucky, we can get there in a day." They moved on through the pipe. Swishing quietly, the torch worked as hard as it could, but its spot of light only reached 10 steps ahead, and after that it was eaten up by the darkness. Water dripped from the ceiling, the walls gleamed damply, something gurgled hollowly, and the drops falling on their heads irritated their skin, as if they weren't water, but stomach acid. Doors of some kind appeared in the walls, and sometimes the black openings of side tunnels, mostly boarded over or covered with welded gratings of steel reinforcement bars. After all, everyone knew that the bright-colored passenger maps didn't show even a third of the whole metro, the real one. Why confuse people with all that? They just hurtled from one marble station to the next with their noses stuck in their mobile phones, leapt forward an hour, and that was it. They had arrived. They had no time to go thinking about what depths of the earth they had plumbed, and why wonder about what lay there behind the walls of the stations and where the barred-off branches of the tunnels led to. It was just good that you got where you were going in good time. Gaze at your phone. Think about something important to you. Don't stick your nose in where it doesn't belong. They walked with the special tunnel stride, docked to 3/4 size to coincide neatly with the sleepers. It took a lot of walking to teach your legs to do that. Those who were stuck at the station all the time couldn't do it. They lost the rhythm and stepped into the gaps.
"Well, what about you, Granddad? Are you alone?"
Yes. All the light went forward, and Artyom couldn't make out the expression on the old man's face. Probably there wasn't one, just a beard and wrinkles. They walked on for about another 50 strides. The knapsack with the radio set started getting heavy, really making its presence felt. Artyom's temples were soaked, and sweat started running down his back. "I had a wife at Sebastopol. Do you live way out at Sebastopol?" "I used to, yes." "Did she leave you?" Somehow that seemed the most likely thing to Artyom. "Your wife?" "I left to write the book. I thought the book was more important, and my wife wasn't going anywhere anyway. Do you understand?" "You left your wife to write a book?" Artyom asked. "How's that possible? And she let you go?" "I ran off. When I came back, she wasn't there. She left. She died." Artyom shifted the bundle with the protective suit from his right hand to his left. "I don't know." "Eh? I don't know if I understand or not." "You understand," the old man said wearily but confidently. Artyom suddenly felt afraid of doing something irrevocable. After that, they counted off the sleepers in silence. They listened to the rumbling echo and distant groaning. It was the metro digesting someone. They weren't expecting any danger from behind. They stared hard straight ahead, trying to spot that faint ripple on the surface of the tunnel, following which something appalling and nameless would emerge, splashing out of that well of black ink. But they didn't watch with the backs of their heads. They should have. Squeak, 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 squeak. The sound stole into their ears like that gradually, and it only became noticeable when it was already too late to swing around and point their gun barrels. Ahoy! If whoever it was had wanted to nudge them in the back with lead and topple them over face down onto the rotten sleepers, they could easily have had time to do it. A lesson. You should never think your own thoughts in the tube. It might start getting jealous. "You're forgetting things, Artyom." "Halt! Who are you?" The knapsack and the bundle pulled his arms down, preventing him from taking aim. A trolley trundled out of the darkness. "Ahoy! Ahoy, friends!" It was that sentry, the cotangent, alone on the trolley, a fearless man. He had abandoned his post and set off into nowhere. The dope had urged him on. What the hell did he want? "Lads, I just thought, maybe I could give you a lift to the next station." And he smiled his very best smile at them, gap-toothed and craggy. Of course, Artyom's back was begging for a ride instead of slogging on by foot. He studied their benefactor, padded jacket, receding hair, puffy under the eyes, but there was light coming out through the pinpricks of his pupils as if it was shining through a keyhole. "How much?" "Don't insult me. You're Sukhoi's son, right? The station master. I'm doing it for free, for peace throughout the world." Artyom shook himself. The knapsack skipped and sat on his shoulders more comfortably. "Thanks," he said, making up his mind. "All right, then," the watchman said delightedly, and waved his arms as if he was dispersing all the fog he had smoked over the years. "You're a big boy. You've got to understand the subtle points. No way you can manage without a beam compass in these matters." He didn't shut up all the way to Riga. "Have you brought us a bit of shit?" The first person to meet them, ahead of the sentries, was a young guy with short-cropped hair and folded-down ears. He had slightly slanting eyes, but they were concrete-colored like the sky. His leather coat didn't close over his chest, and gazing out calmly and confidently at Artyom from among the curls and blue drawings behind the open shirt was a rather hefty Jesus. The young guy had a tin bucket securely perched between his feet and a bag hanging over his shoulder, and he repeatedly slapped the bag to make it give out a tempting jingling sound. "I'll give top price." And then a thin jingle. In the old times, the Riga market, famous throughout Moscow for its cheap roses, used to be above this station. When the sirens started howling, people had only 7 minutes to grasp what was happening, believe it, fumble for their ID, and run to the nearest way down into the metro. And the shrewd flower traders, who only had to go a few steps, crowded inside first, elbowing aside the other people about to be killed. When the question arose of how to earn a living underground, they opened the hermetic doors, shoved aside the bodies heaped up outside, and went back to the market for their roses and tulips. They were withered already, but perfectly good for herbarium. and for a long time the inhabitants of Riga station traded in dried flowers. The flowers were damaged by mold and they were radioactive, but people took them anyway. There was nothing better to be found in the metro. They had to carry on loving and grieving, didn't they? And how could they do that without flowers? Those dried roses and the memory of a happiness that seemed to have been here only yesterday but had now vanished forever allowed Riga to spread its wings. But new flowers couldn't be grown underground. Flowers aren't mushrooms or people. They want sunlight. And although the market above the station had seemed inexhaustible, it dried up. There was a crisis. Everyone expected that the Rigans, accustomed to the good life, would have to switch to short rations and basically eat rats, like the other poor devils at ordinary stations, without any special blessings. But their business acumen saved them. They thought over the possibilities, took stock of the advantages of their location, and suggested a deal to their neighbors to the north, to buy the surplus pig dung and then sell it on as manure to all the stations who cultivated mushrooms. Exhibition accepted the offer. They had more than enough of that particular asset. And Riga, already on the wane, already gray with imminent poverty, acquired a new lease of life. Of course, the new commodity didn't smell the same, but it was more reliable, and in this difficult new age they didn't really have much choice. "Lads, aren't you carrying anything then?" the young guy asked with a short, sharp sniff, disillusioned with his visitors. And at that moment, other men with buckets, just like him, came flying up just a little bit too late. A whole throng of them, shouting across each other. "Shit! Got any shit? Good money. I'll give a bullet for a kilo." Like everywhere else in the metro, they paid here in Kalashnikov cartridges, now the only hard currency. Rubles had become meaningless from the very beginning. What could they be backed with in a world where a word of honor was meaningless and there was no state? Cartridges were far better. The banknotes had been rolled into cigarettes and smoked long ago. Large denominations were more highly prized than low ones. They were cleaner, they burned better, and they produced less tar. The poorer children, who hadn't gotten any empty cartridge cases, played with coins. But the real price of everything now was in bullets, as cartridges were affectionately known. A cartridge for a kilogram at Riga, and somewhere on the Sebastopol line, a kilogram cost 3. Of course, not everyone would want to take up this business. That was fine. There was less competition. "Hey you, Lyoka, shove off! I'm first in line here," said a swarthy, fidgety man with a mustache, shoving the young tattooed guy on his Christ figure. The young guy snarled back, but retreated anyway. "Where were you going, fuck it? Do you think if you meet him in the tunnel, all the shit's yours?" a gray-cheeked, bald man asked, darting up to the first two. "Look what this pipsqueak's trying to pull." "Skip it, fellas, there's no point. They're not carrying anyway." "Let me check that." The sharp sense of smell of short-cropped Lyoka with the cross hadn't deceived him. Cotangent wasn't carrying any cargo. He spread his arms good-naturedly and let Artyom and Homer get down. "This here is the boundary of my domain." And he trundled off back into the darkness, whistling something excruciating. The watch perfunctorily familiarized themselves with the new arrivals and let them through. The traders who had descended on them dispersed. Only the very first one, Lyoka, was left. He was clearly the hungriest. "How about a guided tour, lads? We have plenty of stuff here for tourists to look at. When was the last time you saw a train? Our hotel's in one. The rooms are real swanky, with electricity, in the corridor. I'll get you a discount." "I know everything here inside out," Artyom explained amicably and strode on. Homer shuffled after him. Riga consisted of 2 happy colors, red and yellow. But to discover that, you had to scrape the layer of grease off the tiles that covered the walls of the station. One of the tunnels was plugged with a dead metro train, adapted as hotel accommodation. And all the life of this place was conducted via the other tunnel. "Do you know our bar? It's only just opened. The local brew's first class. And they distill stuff too, of course, from..." "No thanks. But you'll have to amuse yourselves here somehow, guys. The prospect is closed, quarantine. There's a barrier right across the tracks, and machine gunners with dogs. Didn't you know about that then?" Artyom twitched his shoulder. "So what, is there no way at all? It must be possible to arrange things somehow." Lyoka snickered. You go and try to arrange things. They've got a campaign on in Hanza right now. They're fighting corruption. You'll get there at just the wrong moment. Those on the take will get let off the hook later. Their own kind, aren't they? But they have to put someone away. But why did they close the border? Some kind of mushroom disease, like rot. It's either carried on the air or people spread it. So they've put everything on pause for the time being. They're persecuting me, Artyom muttered to himself. They won't let me go. Eh? Asked Lyoka, wrinkling up his forehead. I loathe those damned mushrooms, Artyom said clearly and distinctly. I understand, Lyoka agreed. A miserable kind of business. Several men rushed by with their tin buckets rattling. Lyoka twitched and almost set off after them, but stopped himself. He probably calculated it would be more interesting to stay with the stubborn tourists. Your business is more cheerful, Homer remarked. Don't be like that, Granddad, Lyoka said with a frown. Not everyone can be a broker. It takes talent. A broker? Well, yeah, like me, like the lads over there, a broker. Why, what do you reckon it's called? Homer couldn't even make a guess. He was too busy trying not to smile, but the corners of his lips stretched upwards anyway, no matter how hard he tried to coerce them. And then Artyom spotted a sudden change in his expression. His face turned cold and frightened, like a dead man's. He was looking past the broker, off to one side. Don't be like that, Lyoka told the old man, who had suddenly turned deaf. As it happens, shit is the lifeblood of the economy. What do mushrooms grow on? What do they fertilize the tomatoes with at Sebastopol? So don't talk like that. But Homer nodded to Lyoka at some random word in the middle of a phrase and started sidling away from him and Artyom. Artyom traced out the line of his trajectory with a glance. He saw, but he didn't understand. A slim girl with white hair was standing several steps away from them, kissing a very substantial, beefy broker. As he kissed her, the broker inconspicuously pushed his bucket away with his foot so that it wouldn't take the edge off the enchantment. This girl was the target of Homer's uncertain advance. And how much do you reckon we pull in on this lark? Lyoka asked, switching to Artyom now that he'd lost the old man. Homer stole up to the snogging couple and started tortuously trying to find an angle from which he could glance at their faces. Maybe he had recognized someone, but he didn't dare to interfere and drag them out of their kiss. What are you up to? The beefy guy asked, sensing Homer with the folds on the nape of his neck. What do you want, old man? The face of the girl, torn away from her kiss, was steamy and shriveled, like the sucker of a leech that has just been pulled off an arm. It was the wrong face, not the one Homer was seeking, Artyom realized. I'm sorry. Push off, said the leech. And Homer, sullen now but still agitated, rejoined Artyom and Lyoka. I made a mistake, he explained. Artyom decided not to ask any questions, though. Open the tap of the old man's revelations and they could strip the thread. Of course she couldn't have... No way, not with someone like that. Old fool, Homer said to himself. What, you mean you work at a loss? You could call it a loss. Hanza takes half of every delivery in customs duty, and now anyway, with this quarantine... Hanza was what the Commonwealth of Circle Line stations called itself. All kinds of goods from every end of the metro had to pass through Hanza's markets and its custom posts. Many shuttle traders, rather than risk their necks traveling right across the metro, preferred to take their goods as far as the nearest market at an intersection between the Circle Line and a radial line and pass them on to local merchants. And it was less bother to leave the profit here, in one of Hanza's banks, in order to avoid having your head chopped off in the dark tunnels by evil characters who had spotted a successful deal. The stubborn individuals who insisted on lugging their goods further themselves had to pay customs duty in any case. And no matter how well the other stations lived, Hanza grew richer. No one anywhere in the metro could lay down the law to Hanza. That made its citizens proud and happy, and everyone else dreamed of obtaining Hanza citizenship. From the center of the platform, Artyom could see a line of goods trolleys that hadn't been allowed into Riga running into the tunnel. That was what the brokers did, raced each other to buy their commodity in the northern tunnel and sell it in the southern one. After that, other people made a living from it. Trading's come to complete standstill, Lyoka complained. They're strangling the entrepreneur, the fuckers. Fucking lousy monopolists. A man goes about his own honest business, but oh no, who gave them the right to get rich off our backs? I have to slave away, and their bellies will just keep getting fatter? That's oppression, bugger it. If they let us trade freely, the entire metro would thrive. Artyom felt a sudden liking for Lyoka, despite the smell. He wanted to continue this ludicrous conversation. There's no shortage of the stuff in Hanza, he said, remembering. One time I had to work at Pavelets, on the Circle Line, raking out the crap house. They sentenced me to work for a year. I escaped after a week. Consider that your baptism, Lyoka said with a nod. They dumped all that stuff into cesspits and shafts. They didn't stoop to trading in it. Lyoka chuckled darkly. They live in grand style. He took out a cigarette case with ready-cut papers and a tobacco pouch and offered some to them. Homer declined, but Artyom took some. He positioned himself under a light bulb dangling from the ceiling and glued his eyes to the words on the paper before rolling the homemade tobacco in them. A yellow page from a book with painstakingly printed letters, ripped out by hand and torn along just the right line for making a roll-up, but not so that he could make sense of the words. God only knew what they meant. And the newly born propensity of gravity, such were the origins of the rule of the few. And so, prepare yourself to live in time's hegemony. Here, neither tapper nor wolf exist, and the sky is pregnant with the future, that satiating grain of the well-fed source. For just today, those that were victorious managed to avoid flight's burial ground by tearing the wings off the dragonfly, and the wings had been torn off precisely. Artyom stuffed these useless letters with homemade baccy, rolled them up neatly, slavered them so that one edge stuck to the other, and asked for a light. Lyoka clicked his alcohol-filled cigarette lighter made from a machine gun cartridge case. The paper burned with delicious sweetness. The baccy was lousy. "So you need to get into Prospect really badly, do you?" Lyoka whispered, squinting through the smoke. "Into Hanza. Yes, we do." "Got visas already?" "Yes." They both took another drag. Homer started coughing. Artyom couldn't care less. "How much are you willing to pay?" "Name the price." "It won't be me naming the price, brother. Other people decide that there. I can only introduce you." "Introduce us." Lyoka suggested they should take one for the road in the uproariously merry local bar with the sign that said "The Last Time." But Artyom remembered what they distilled the spirits from. They agreed Lyoka would take them there and introduce them for 10 cartridges. A fair agreement, made in a brotherly spirit. The sanitary cordon cut across the tracks right just before they entered Peace Prospect. Formally speaking, only the Circle Line station belonged to Hanza, and the Radial Line station supposedly existed on its own terms. But that was only formally and supposedly. If they needed to cut off the other lines, then they did it like a shot. The Hanza border guards in their gray camouflage gear stabbed the sharp beams of their torches into people's faces and barked demands at them to turn around and go back to where they had come from. A placard perched on a pole like a scarecrow with the word "Quarantine" and a picture of a mushroom pitted with ulcers. The sentries refused to talk to shuttle traders, and it was impossible even to make eye contact with them. They hid their eyes behind the forward-tilted visors of their camouflage-modeled caps. There was no way to take this bastion except by storm. Lyoka the broker lingered, looking for acquaintances of his behind the visors. Eventually he dived down and whispered something under one of them, winked at Artyom with his face half turned towards him, and twitched his chin to beckon him over. "They're under arrest!" The snout under the cap explained to the smoldering crowd about why these three were suddenly being let through. "Come on, get back now, you'll carry the plague in." They were led under armed guard through an oddly quiet Peace Prospect. Trading stalls closed off with screens, buyers besieging the cordon, disheveled saleswomen chilling their asses on the granite, chattering about life, death, and destiny, and it was almost dark. The market wasn't working. Light had to be saved. At any other time, this place would have been seething with life. Peace Prospect was a sort of center point where people brought all sorts of stuff from all over the place. Clothes to suit any taste, stalls of books, which Artyom used to be unable to walk past, burnt-out smartphones in a heap. And what if you suddenly come across one that works, and it has photographs in it, in full color, jerked straight out of someone's memory? Buy it? only to remember someone else's children, but on a thing like that, the only call you could make was into nowhere. And guns, of course. All kinds. Everything priced in cartridges. Sell what you don't need, buy what you do, and clear off out of it. The armed escort were strict. They watched carefully to make sure that Artyom and Homer didn't run off, prodding them in the back all the way from the radial line station to the circle line. Then they had them stand and wait by a little metal door in a white stone wall. After about 10 minutes, they were called. They had to duck down, then again and again. The service premises seemed to have been made for Morlocks, but then the entire generation that had been born already underground was stunted, and it would have fitted in here perfectly. 2 men were ensconced in the little room. The first one had an impressive round face and glasses, but not enough hair. The rest of his body was hidden away somewhere in the depths of a massive polished desk. It looked as if there was nothing there but the entirely autonomous head. The second little man had nothing interesting about him at all. Deputy Station Master of Peace Prospect, Circle Line, Sergei Sergeyevich Rozhin, said the inconspicuous man, respectfully indicating the fat-faced one.
I'm listening,
the fat face said in a staid, deep voice. It's like this, Sergei Sergeyevich. These guys need to get into Hanza. They've got visas, Lyoka told him. The head in glasses strained rustily to aim its puffy nose at him and sucked in air noisily. Catching a sniff, it contorted in a sudden spasm. Apparently, brokers weren't often admitted to this office. Until further instructions, entry to the territory of Hanza is whatchamacallit to be denied. Full stop, Rozhin proclaimed. This was awkward. So are there no options? Artyom asked morosely, but Lyoka hissed at him. What options? Bribing an official is the most immediately right now. That's it. And don't you ever dare again. Is that clear or not? Rozhin's head declared menacingly. At a time when people throughout the entire metro, you simply have no right. That's what we have quarantine for. Otherwise, the situation could get out of hand. Do you understand that or not? And if we've been put here to keep order, then we're going to keep order and keep order right to the bitter end, because you know what's at stake. Phytosanitary control measures. Dry rot, incidentally. This conversation is over. He stopped talking, and silence established itself in the room as if the refusal had been recorded in advance on a cassette. It had played right to the end and clicked, and no music followed. Rozhin seared Artyom and Lyoka with his gaze through the thick lenses of his glasses, and the silence carried on accumulating, as if something was expected of them. A dung fly buzzed past, as heavy as a bomber plane. Had Lyoka brought that in his pocket, then? Then I'll go over the surface, Artyom said with a shrug. You're a bungler, Lyoka. I'm still due my 10 anyway. Why go over the surface? The inconspicuous man finally spoke up. That's not safe. Unlike Rozhin, he hadn't wrinkled up his face or snorted even once during the entire meeting. And in general, it was clear that he didn't wrinkle up his face very often. His face was smooth. His features were serene. His voice was lulling. Sergei Sergeyevich has expressed the official position. He is on duty, after all. We can understand his position. And Sergei Sergeyevich has correctly identified the problem. Our task is to prevent the spread of dry rot, a dangerous fungoidal infection that affects mushrooms. If some compromise has matured in your mind, discuss it with me. The situation is serious. 100 cartridges for 3. I'm not with them, said Lyoka. 100 cartridges for 2. Artyom glanced to see how Rozhin was doing. Such perfidy ought to have set him squirming. But no, the deputy station master hadn't suffered at all, as if the inconspicuous man was producing ultrasound that was simply inaudible to his ears. 100 cartridges. 3 and a bit clips of the 6 that Artyom had brought with him, just for the opportunity to get into Hanza. And this was only the start of the journey, after all. But even so, all the other routes, including the one across the surface, could cost him more. His head, for instance. The map was there in front of his eyes. Down through Hanza. Ride on its comfortable, rapid passenger trolleys all the way to Pavelets, and from there a quick leap. No difficulties or obstacles, straight to Teatralnaya, and no need to set foot across the border of the Red Line, and the Reich could be bypassed. A deal, said Artyom. Should I get them out right here? Well, naturally, the inconspicuous man replied benignly. Artyom took off his backpack, unfastened the bundle, felt to find the clips hidden in among the junk, and started clicking out the dull, sharp-nosed cartridges onto the desk. 10, he said, pushing the first batch towards Sergei Sergeyevich. How very tactless. The inconspicuous man was aggrieved. He got up off his seat and raked the cartridges towards himself. The man is on duty, and what do you go and do? What do you think I'm here for? Fortunately, Sergei Sergeyevich hadn't seen the cartridges. Frowning formidably, he cleared his throat and started sorting out the documents dumped on the desk, shifting them from one heap to another. Now he seemed to have been left in the office alone. He was quite incapable of registering the presence of all the others with his sense organs. 8, 9, 10, 100, all correct, the inconspicuous man concluded. Thank you. You will be escorted. Lyoka patted his Christ approvingly. And let there be no more whatchamacallit. Rozhin's head piped up. Because there have to be some kind of principles. And at a difficult moment like this, when solidarity is required. Dry rot, urgent matter, best regards. Homer, who had remained dumb in amazement throughout this meeting, bowed to the talking head with genuine reverence. Beautiful, he said. Best regards, the head repeated strictly. Artyom swung the satchel up onto his shoulders. He grabbed it too abruptly, and a green metal side projected from the upper corner. Sergei Sergeyevich came to life and started lifting up his short, plump trunk, which he did after all possess, from behind the desk. Isn't that a whatchamacallit radio set you got there? It looks very much in a certain sense like an army radio in terms of carrying it into Hanza territory. Artyom squinted at the inconspicuous man, but now that Rozhin had woken up, the inconspicuous man, having barely managed to scrape his 100 cartridges away somewhere under the desk, had lost all interest in reality and was absent-mindedly cleaning the dirt out from under his fingernails. Thank you, Artyom retorted, picking up the bundle and pulling Homer towards the exit. There's still my 10 due to me, the broker reminded them, scooting out behind. Artyom heard muttering through the door that had slammed, and on the platform they were already expected. Not the sentries in camouflage gear who had led them here, men in civilian clothes holding their little security service ID books open, but it was impossible to read anything because it was so dark. Security service, one of them, a tall man, declared civilly. Major Svinaluk, Boris Ivanovich, hand over your weapons, please, and the communications equipment. You are under arrest on suspicion of espionage for the Red Line.